Ulimwengu wote mali ya Mungu, wala sio mali ya Amerika. Walimwengu wote muwe macho na ujanja wao wa Marekani. Lengo lao waitawale dunia, wachukue mali zote za dunia. Tena wanataka watu wa dunia waiabudu hiyo Amerika. Vita nayo machafuko ya dunia, kila mara Marekani yahusika. Ukichunguza utaona ni mafuta, kama si mafuta ni almasi. Mifano hiyo iko mingi ya kutosha, ya Iraki, Kongo, Sierra Leone. Kiamata ya Amerika yahusika, inadai inalinda maslahi. Oh, dunia ya Mungu, watu wote tunawaonya, msiabudu Amerika. Tumuabudu Muumba wetu, ni yeye pekee astahili kuabudiwa. Hawajali kama watu wanakufa, bora tu wasiwe ni wa Marekani. Wanaiuza AK-47, wabakiza Air 2000. Hawajali kutumia kila mtu, limradi ya kubali masharti. Ukisikia wakisema ni mbaya, jua ameyakataa masharti. Kumbuka yule Sadamu wa Huseni, usisahau na Mobutu Sese Seko. Wote walijengwa na Wamarekani, kisha wakabomolewa baadaye. Na waonya viongozi Afrika, Amerika sio wa kucheza nao. Kiwaona wajifanya marafiki, jua wameshaiona dhahabu. Dunia ya Mungu, watu wote tunawaonya, msiabudu Amerika. Tumuabudu Muumba wetu, ni yeye pekee astahili kuabudiwa.
Yeah, kwa hivyo huu wimbo ambao tumeimba hapo ni wimbo umeimbwa na Faustin Munishi. He's a Tanzanian artist that resides in Kenya, partly because he likes Kenya, and during the time of his growth, at that time kulikuwa na a lot of studios in Kenya. Many artists were coming from Tanzania to DRC. That is the time when bands were growing in Kenya. So Munishi was among the people wenye walikuja in Kenya in order to access production ya ngoma zao. And then of course Munishi was among the first Tanzanian artists kuanzisha a one-man ensemble. Just him and his accordion and powerful messages ambazo amekuwa akitoa. Na sasa today we are looking at Munishi's song Msiabudu Amerika. Munishi actually was Pan-Africanist before most people became Pan-African. And therefore, I want us today on Frida's Verdict tuichambue pole pole. Frida ni mimi hapa na ninapenda muziki sana. This is the #1 show in Kenya na East Africa ambaye tunaongelea muziki and then comparing it with real life examples that are happening in the real world. We are transforming the fantastic world, the fantasy world into real life examples. So let's get started. Kama vile mnaona tukiimba hapo, tunasema Munishi anasema ulimwengu wote ni mali ya Mungu. For those of you that don't speak Swahili, Munishi is saying the entire world belongs to God and it doesn't belong to America. Wala sio mali ya Amerika. Walimwengu wote muwe macho na ujanja wao wa Amerika. Anasema he is saying that all people around the world should be careful with America's cunning. Now, Then he proceeds to say, why would Munishi say that the world does not belong to America? Then he continues to say, now ujanja wa wawam, they want to take over the world and take all the resources in this world. Anasema ya kwamba walimwengu wote muwe macho na ujanja wao wa Marekani, lengo lao waitawale dunia. They want to take over the world and govern the entire world and take all the resources from this world. Wachukue mali zote za dunia. Tena wanataka watu wa dunia waiabudu hiyo Amerika. I'll play the clip so that I can explain this stanza. That they want the people of the entire world to worship America. Munishi is writing this song in the early 2000s. Now let us see why Munishi would have such an idea in the first place. For you to understand why this idea is coming to life in 2000s, in the early 2000s, you have to go back in history. Because remember, you don't know where you're going if you cannot examine the present and look at the past. So, the year is 1941. During 1941, people are still at the height of the World War. The World War has begun, and there is a charter that is called the Atlantic Charter. The Atlantic Charter had begun, people had begun to talk about a borderless world where people were trading freely and all that. So, by the time the World War was ending in the year 1945, lots of people had agreed to come together and trade globally through a system that was fronted by the World Bank, you know the World Bank, by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and also agreements through the World Trade Organization and another agreement that was called the General Agreement on Trade Tariffs. Why is it important for you to know this? It's because before 1945, I told you I'd take you through classes of history on this or as we make these verdicts, because when you're making a judgment, you have to present the evidence. Now, verdicts are not made out of proof. Because if you're looking for proof, then there is no need for us to examine these lyrics. This is a show about evidence, because I want to allow my viewers to think for themselves and make judgments. That is why it's Frida's verdict, but I welcome you to be the jurors. Now, before 1945, in the 1920s and 30s, the world over went through a period that was called the Great Depression. The Great Depression saw a lot of economic hardship in a lot of countries in the world. So by 1945, when the World Bank and the IMF were formed, they were formed as institutions that are going to offer relief to countries economically. Now, they came together and said, we are going to develop an economic order. What is this economic order? It was called the Liberal International Economic Order. Do you want to know what that means? Well, whether you want it or not, I'm going to tell you because I know. So the Liberal International Economic Order was an arrangement where countries would open their borders and people could trade freely. It involved free markets, free trade. It involved, what is that called? Multilateralism. So in multilateralism, it means that Kenya, for instance, is free to trade with Tanzania, free to trade with Uganda, to trade with all these countries all around. So when Munishi is saying that there is trickery in it, he says, na ujanja wa Marekani, that he noticed that America is using trickery and cunning in order to own the resources of the world. Now, what does he mean? And I've told you it is associated with the Liberal International Economic Order that wanted countries to open their borders for trading and all that. This is what he means. He means that slowly but surely, through this Liberal International Economic Order, America was taking control of countries because they had access to markets for their manufactured goods. It's almost as though colonialism and repatriation of profits was happening to the American state, whether or not African countries were under colonialism. They were preparing for continuous exploitation of African and Asian and Latin American countries way before these countries even got independence. So he's saying it is trickery. Why? Because when they introduced this Liberal International Economic Order, it came with also one hand, they are giving you foreign aid. They are telling you, like, now in Kenya during the 1960s and 1970s, after the Kenyan man had taken over leadership in Africa, they were given lots of money. And then because countries didn't know what to do with it, they ended up squandering this money and enriching themselves, and then they remained with lots of debt. So these countries came together. The people that manage the IMF, they are called IMF and World Bank together. It's called the Bretton Woods institutions. Now, they came together and told countries, you know what? We can give you reprieve for these debts, but you have to do a little thing. And the countries were like, what do we need to do? They were told, you need to do structural adjustment programs. What are structural adjustment programs? These are changes in policy in these countries. For example, some of the things they needed to do was to cut down on the spending on public needs. For instance, the healthcare, they had to cut down. Education, they had to slash. That is why a lot of people now started to have to pay for education. Like in Kenya, I'm sorry, Nina, we pay a lot of history, but for instance, in Kenya, because of the loans we had, we were given conditions. It is a set of conditions. In international relations, it's called conditionality. These conditions came and we were told, for me to give you money, you have to do this. Number one, open your borders for free trade, which means American investors would come to Kenya and do what is called the foreign direct investments. So we've opened our borders, we have lowered trade tariffs, we have, what is it called, diminishing our currency. The shilling had to take a hit so that it can lose value a little bit, for them to bring structural changes so that we can be able to survive the debts that we are already in. Munanielewa? So Munishi calls it trickery. He says they are tricking you. And because I am Frida, and of course, you know, I know a lot of history, I'm going to tell you why it was trickery. We have established the trickery. The trickery is, I'm giving you money, but I'm also giving you conditions. You have to open your markets. We have to have free markets. We have to have multilateralism. We have to have free trade. Now, that is the trickery Munishi is talking about. But now the question is, why does he call it trickery? Well, it is because if you look at the history of most of these countries, for instance, America, Britain, all of them, they came to power, they came to around a lot of wealth because they restricted trade in their countries. Can I give you an example of UK? In UK, in the 1800s, they restricted even outsiders from selling corn, mahindi in UK. You could not sell maize in UK. Even if a trader in UK was selling maize, for instance, I'll give you an example, at £2, you could not come and say, I will sell it at £1.30. You want to know why? They were protecting what is called the domestic cradle industries, small industries. So they made sure their traders were selling at whatever price they wanted, even though there were other people from outside that would produce the same thing at a lower price. That is how you protect your country's economy. There were laws that were called the Corn Laws. They were repealed in the year 1846 after a long period of protest from people saying that why would we buy corn expensively in Britain if other people can sell it cheaply? And that struggle happened from the year 1837 all the way to 1846. Now, ladies and gentlemen, those of you that are listening to me, the same countries that applied these principles to enrich their countries came to African countries, Asian countries, Latin American countries, countries that were already suffering. They were just starting to rebuild their industries after they had been freed from colonialism, and then told them, you know what? If you want to get debt, if you want to get what is called foreign aid, now you have to allow our people to come and sell. So that is how the textile industry, for instance, in Kenya, lost greatly. It's almost negligent right now. It's non-existent because why would I buy a pair of jeans at $15, for example, if I can get it from another country at just $3? So in that way, a lot of African countries' industries were wiped out because of competition from countries whose industries had established long before these African countries even got independence. So when Munishi says that it is trickery, it is indeed trickery. And part of the trickery is in the branding of it. This is part one of this series on the song Munishi. Now, let me tell you the branding that America and other superpowers used in order to get access to African markets. Number one, they said that it is going to give people what is called International Division of Labor. International Division of Labor is where they are saying, well, if Kenya produces tea, why can't we take tea from Kenya? And then they say, if Zambia, for instance, has copper, then let us take copper from Zambia. Now, if America and Germany, for instance, if Germany produces better cars, let us get cars from Germany, and therefore they called it International Division of Labor, where countries are going to be given, because a country cannot produce everything they want to produce, which is what is called autarky. Autarky is when countries try to achieve self-reliance and cut out the outside world and say, we will get local solutions for local problems, which means they will get their own tea, their own machinery, their own all that. That concept in international relations is called autarky. And countries can't practically or logically achieve that. So then, America told the world that, we can do International Division of Labor, and the International Division of Labor was going to eventually give countries what is called the comparative advantage, which means everybody has something to gain. It's a positive-sum game. In the game theory, you know what that means. And then, so when we talk about the comparative advantage, we are saying that every country is getting what they need, because anyway, each country has something they produce better than the other one. Hence, the division of labor in the grand scheme of things in international political economy. Okay? Now, Munishi says that is trickery. Let us go to stanza 2. There's a part he says, na ujanja and then he says, hawajali kama watu, no. Before he says that is, na ujanja, no. Aya, vita nayo machafuko ya dunia, kila mara Marekani yahusika, ukichunguza utaona ni mafuta, kama si mafuta ni almasi. For those of you that don't speak Swahili, Munishi was saying, and no wonder he got cancelled for some of these songs. He was saying that if you look around the world, any sort of international conflict that you see around you, America is involved in it one way or the other. Now, if you put a microscope into these conflicts, you will find that indeed it is either an oil issue or a diamond issue or any other minerals that America might want or America might have strategic interests in. And then he says, in fact, the world is not short of these examples. If you look at Iraq, he says, Iraq, Congo, Sierra Leone. I'm going to add Iran because I am in 2026 and currently we are experiencing high fuel prices in Kenya due to a war that America is in with Iran over the Strait of Hormuz, which controls around 20% of the global oil supply and 25% of the global gas supply, sea gas supply. So if you look at conflicts around the globe, you will notice that America has an interest of either oil or minerals. Venezuela. In Venezuela, I hear that in early 2026, after Maduro, President Maduro, the Venezuelan president the Venezuelan president by the name Maduro, after he had been captured and of course is going to be arraigned in an American prison, an American court, and of course, judged there, I hear that America is now asking investors from America to invest around $1 billion in mining and also in production of oil. What does that tell you about the ousting of Maduro? Just think. If today someone ousted you from a position and then said, now Venezuela is free, investors can go there and increase the production of oil. I'm giving you time so that you can think like an adult. Let us go to Iraq. Now, if you look at Iraq, for instance, there's a lot of things that support the fact that America has a lot of strategic interest in oil and minerals. The countries that have been mentioned are Iraq, Congo, and Sierra Leone. If you look at Congo, today there is cobalt, there is coltan, there is gold, there is oil in Congo. And do you want to know what else there is? there is also war and crisis. America allegedly has been accused of sponsoring rebel groups so that they can cause instability. And when there's instability, like in international relations, we say it's actually beneficial. There are people that gain from war. If you look at war, the economics of war, there's always a winner and a loser. And in every situation, in every war, there is money to be made. So there are people that are supplying, state-sponsored investors that are supplying guns to rebel groups to cause instability in African countries so that they can make way for deals for them to access the mining reserves of these countries. Let us go to Sierra Leone. Did you know that Sierra Leone produces one of the best qualities of diamonds? You want to guess who else is in Sierra Leone? America. America is in Sierra Leone, and the last election, I think, was 2023 in Sierra Leone. America says that apparently there was interference, and they are demanding that they look into these electoral processes. Now, it begs the question, is Sierra Leone a sovereign state? If another state can come in and say, I don't think the elections were good, you can go back. Who made America the international police for politics around the globe? We will come to that. We will come to that as to what, gives America the brazen attitude they have towards interference with electoral processes in African states, especially. He talks about Iraq, but for me to explain this situation, I have to go to stanza 2 of the song. He says, hawajali kama watu wanakufa, bora tu wasiwe ni wa Marekani, wanayeuza AK-47 wabakiza Air 2000. You can hear, we have sung that with my partner right here, my singing partner, guys.
Hawajali kama watu wanakufa, bora tu wasiwe ni wa Marekani, wanaiuza AK-47 wabakiza Air 2000.
Right here, you listen to it. Now, the people that don't speak Swahili, what Munishi was saying in this song was that America doesn't care if people die, as long as they are not Americans. So here he's shedding the light on the hypocrisy of human rights and democracy coming from America as a requirement for third world countries, while America's foreign policy is anything but protecting democracy or human rights as long as American citizens are not affected. And then he says something very interesting, that they are selling AK-47 to African countries, Asian countries, Latin American countries, and keeping for themselves Air 2000. Now, an AK-47 is just a ground assault rifle. Very basic. But Air 2000, during that time when Munishi was singing this song, was a major surface-to-air assault weapon. Now, today in 2026, we can compare it to nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction. Why am I putting nuclear weapons in this whole situation? It's because in 1968, America spearheaded the signing of a nuclear non-proliferation treaty for so many countries, except for 3 countries that said, you know what, Pakistan, India, and Israel. They refused to sign that nuclear non-proliferation treaty. Now, the whole point of signing nuclear non-proliferation treaty is so that the superpowers that had already acquired nuclear weapons do not grow further their nuclear weapons, and also don't support other countries that did not have nuclear weapons to develop nuclear weapons. And because it was a double-edged sword, if a country had not made any nuclear weapons during the First World War, the Second World War, or the Cold War, during the arms race, they were required to not make any nuclear weapons. But here is the catch. Munishi says that for America, there is an exception. They can keep all the cool stuff. Meanwhile, African states and these other third world countries are required to just use basic assault rifles. I wonder what would happen if then an African state needed to protect its sovereignty against a superpower with more than 5,000 nuclear weapon warheads, weapons of mass destruction. But you know what? Just like every other thing in this world, there's an angst, a definition angst about terrorism and about what weapons of mass destruction is. Actually, America doesn't have a problem with weapons of mass destruction, the production of them or the distribution of them. What they have a problem with, and what most international relations scholars say that most countries have a problem with, is who has the weapons of mass destruction. It is not a question of what or how many. It's the question of in whose hands are these weapons. And so yes, America retains the most powerful weapons, while African states are expected to survive on inshallah and good vibes. So Munishi was right on the money when he says that they are selling AK-47 and keeping all the cool stuff for themselves. So I promised you that I was going to talk about Iraq and these other countries that Munishi had mentioned earlier. He says, he continues to say, hawajali kutumia kila mtu, limuradi ya kubali mashariti, kisikia wakisema ni mbaya, jua ameyakataa mashariti.